And welcome back, listeners. Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Invisible Threat. And as is normal, becoming very, very normal, I am joined here by Dr. Matt Eby, author of The Invisible Threat, as well as co-author Joanne Eby coming in. Joanne, I believe you still are in Kansas City right now. Is that correct?
We'll just go with that.
What I'm really excited about today is our subject matter. But before that, what I'm really, really excited about is to rehash the past. And what I mean by that is it is Masters Week. And I want to share a story, or have Joanne share a story about whenever I had invited both, at the time, Matt, not Dr. Matt, pre-dissertation, right? And Joanne to come and accompany us to the Masters. And I want you, since it is Masters Week and we're time stamping this podcast. Well, I don't even want to take away the story. Joanne, why don't you share with the listeners a little bit of not only the experience, but whenever I asked you and Matt to go to the Masters and accompany us a few years ago?
I will share. And as you recall, you had sent an email and said, hey, would you and Matt like to join Christine and I and a few others at the Masters? We have tickets. We have accommodation. You just need to show up. And I'm like, I don't know. It's a long way away. What do you think, Matt? And Matt's like, no, that's just like, so we're both kind of lukewarm. And so I ignored the email. And next week you're like, did you get my email? What do you think? It's like, well, we'll think about it. We'll let you know. And I don't know, maybe it was a month before. And you asked again, like, are you guys coming? And it's like, you know, and then Matt and I discussed it, and he's like, "Well, sure, we'll go, and we'll drive from St. Louis, and sure, we'll just go." So I wasn't thinking anything of it. We were driving all the way there, and we get there, and we meet up with you and Christina and your other friends, and again, still not thinking anything of it. And then the next morning, get up really early, get on that transportation, get dropped off, go into the Masters, and within like just moments after passing through and being there and seeing the driving range, and it was like, oh my word. And just like the first day, it just got better and better. And I was just like, what in the world was I thinking? And I had said to you, even I think at lunch that day, it's like, okay, the next time you invite me, you don't even have to ask. It's just yes. We were only going to go the first day. And it's like, by the end of the first day, it's like, we want to go tomorrow. And I just called work at the time and said, I'm not coming to the office this week. I'm at the Masters. I had no idea. And to this day, an even funnier story, Carter, my son still holds it against me that I didn't invite him.
For those listeners out there, if you haven't been, it's got to be a bucket list moment. Whether you're a golfer or not, it doesn't matter. It's like one of the greatest experiences I've had in my life. And once again, Carter, thank you so much for inviting us and hanging in there and convincing us that we needed to go, because I had no idea how special of an event that is.
Matt, we were within, like, I don't know, 20 feet of Tiger Woods hanging out on that green.
You were that closer than that. As the guards were trying to hold you back from diving on top of them, I think you were much closer than 20 feet away from Tiger. He was right across the rope there as he was going through the crowd. Yeah, what a great experience. Yeah, so thank you once again for that tremendous opportunity and convincing us that we almost missed out. I can't believe it. So yeah, great story.
Yeah, it was funny because I can remember a story that you were sharing with me, Joanne, about how I think you called maybe your brother or family member or something. You're like, well, it's practice round tickets. Is it really worth going to the Masters? Should I really have to worry about, going? I mean, I mean,
It was a coworker, and he looked at me and he's like, are you nuts? Go.
as the listeners here, if you know anything about the Masters, and if it is on your bucket list to do, obviously they have a lottery for a reason, like just to get practice round tickets or to get even regular seat tickets. But that experience is really it's sort of akin to, I can remember the first time when I went to the Sistine Chapel. It's one of those, like, literally a religious experience, especially if you are a golfer. But to your point, Matt, you don't have to be a golfer to appreciate the amazing experience that is.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to Christina, I'm like, what are they waiting on? Like, what are they thinking about? What is it that they like? But now you know, right? When or if you know, that's why that saying's out there. But it was for us one of the funniest things, and I love sharing this story. I'm going to share it right now of what other people don't know until they go there. And you were like, "Hey, I want to go ahead and I want to buy lunch for us today." And I kind of laughed when I was like, "Okay," because how affordable it is to go, "Okay, you go ahead and pay and I'll let you go ahead and pay," because you didn't know what it was going to be. You thought it was like a normal sporting event where it's like, "Oh, that'll be $112 for, 3 beers," right? But no, I want to say it was somewhere around, I don't know, $30 for all of us to eat lunch, right?
Yeah, yeah. You give them $20, you get change back.
I was really excited about timestamping this episode, but I really am truly excited about a very relevant subject matter that we're going to be talking about today. And, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and digital assets and things of that nature. And we have a terminology within our document set that we create around Rufata. And I'm not sure if we're going to get that deep into that aspect or not, but I am really, really excited about talking about this. So, we're stepping out of ultimately the conversation that we've normally been having around discretionary distributions and into something that looks completely different, right? Crypto custody.
Yeah, and it seems a bit different because we're going to make a judgment at the asset level as opposed to at the account level, like we've been doing in all the previous episodes. So, let me give you a real world example of how everything we've been talking about could show up in practice in a real organization. So, let's set it up. A state chartered trust company receives a request from one of its largest clients, and that request is to administer an estate that holds a meaningful allocation of crypto assets, including crypto ETFs, direct holdings in a digital currency, and other digital assets, including the decedent's social media accounts and cloud based photos and videos. All of the crypto assets are properly assigned to the trust. The surviving spouse is the beneficiary of the marital trust, but is incapacitated and resides in a nursing facility. The deceased children have a POA over their mother's health care, but the trust company is named as the sole trustee of the marital. The financial advisor, who will be manage the marketable securities, stocks, and bonds, provided the trust company accept its appointment as trustee, it wants them to do it, and agree to custody all of the trust assets, including the crypto and the other digital assets, and has said that all of these assets are part of the overall portfolio. So, the question is very simple. Can the trust company custody all of these assets for the client?
What makes this question relevant and what makes this moment different is something in the industry for state chartered trust companies has changed. The SEC recently issued a no action relief in the form of what is called a no action letter. They issued it just last September 30th. And that no action letter stated simply that the Division of Investment Management would not recommend enforcement action to the SEC against either RIAs or regulated funds if they chose to maintain crypto assets and related cash and cash equivalents with certain state chartered financial institutions, namely state chartered trust companies. That means, under certain conditions, a state chartered trust company can now be considered a qualified custodian for crypto assets.
Then, Joanne, on the surface, this looks like if you have a trust charter, you are a qualified custodian and can provide custody for crypto assets. I mean, that's good news, right? I mean, the trust company can service this client and they won't have to say no because they can't custody the digital assets, right?
And that's exactly how the conversation begins. We are authorized because we're a trust company. We meet the definition. We can service the client and earn fee revenue from custody of the digital assets.
And Carter, the assumption forms almost immediately on the side of the trust company. If we're allowed to do it and we can charge fees for it, then our competitors will probably be doing it. So we should absolutely consider doing it as well. But it is important to understand the SEC's message. What I want to do, Carter and Matt, is just read from the published statement that was issued by one SEC commissioner. Here's what it says. For too long, registered advisors and regulated funds have been caught up in a guessing game as to whether their entity of choice for crypto asset custody, which may also be the only available custodian available for such service, is a permissible custodian under the custody provisions of both the Investment Advisors Act of 1940 and the Investment Company Act of 1940. The statement goes on to say that the no action letter does not expand the definition of a permissible custodian under those acts. Rather, it provides an SEC stat position regarding the use of companies for crypto asset custody. That this particular SEC commissioner contended that state chartered trust companies already are permissible custodians, and that the no action letter applies to state trust companies operating within a regulatory framework, which they do, that ensures investor protection and is similar in material respects to the regulatory frameworks applicable to other types of permissible custodians.
A lot to unpack there. I guess it bears the question, will the executive committee room feel settled? Because now different voices start coming in, right? Even from the SEC.
That's right. And if they also listen to a speech that same SEC commissioner gave on the same day the no action letter was published, they might take comfort from her voice. At one point, she notes that custody services is an age-old business, so regulatory frameworks are already well developed. But in the very same speech, she acknowledges the changing nature of the assets being custodied and the risks involved.
Exactly. And this is the point where most institutions don't realize what just happened. Nothing about the facts of the original case changed, but the center of gravity of the conversation shifted. It moved from understanding the situation to trying to resolve it. And when that shift happens too quickly, which is what we've been saying all along, the system starts reaching for answers before it has actually understood and analyzed the judgment required. So instead of asking, what does this situation actually require? The room starts asking, what are we allowed to do? What have we done before? And what will happen if we say no? And that's the signal. That's when you know you are no longer just analyzing a case. You are actually inside of a live fiduciary judgment. And this is exactly where the AFIRE Compass becomes necessary. Because without it, each voice in the room sounds reasonable. Each argument feels defensible. And yet, the system starts to drift. So instead of trying to answer the question immediately and provide resolution, do we custody crypto or not? Slow the system down and ask a different question. What is actually acting on this judgment right now? And when you map that, you start to see the forces, not as opinion, but as structured tension. So let's start with the north-south pole, the first polarity on the compass, anchors versus identity. From an anchor's perspective, 1, we are a trust institution. 2, we custody assets. And 3, we have authority under the charter.
Asset custody fits our model.
Exactly. But now, watch what happens, Carter, on the other side. From an identity perspective, who are we in this moment? Are we acting as a traditional state-chartered trust institution, applying established custody practice, or are we stepping into something different, a technology-enabled custody model with activities we don't fully control? And now you can feel it. Anchors are pulling towards this fits within our authority and our structure. But identity is asking, is this still who we are when the assets change?
Let's turn to the east-west axis, the second polarity on the compass, fairness versus risk. And then fairness enters. Fairness asks the question, well, if we custody traditional assets, are we providing the same level of service and control here as we do for other assets we custody? Or are we treating this new crypto asset differently because we don't actually fully understand it?
So fairness is not just consistency. And its equivalence of control, or it is the equivalence of control and protection. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And now on the other side of the compass, risk responds. Risk says crypto custody is fundamentally different, which it is. There are private keys, irreversible transactions, cyber exposure. And if something goes wrong, there's no recovery mechanism with these assets. The joint federal banking agencies, the OCC, Federal Reserve, FDIC, they had actually issued risk management guidance for crypto asset safekeeping just 2 months before the SEC's no action letter. So when you know that those joint banking agencies issued the guidance, it makes it feel less risky if you're a bank regulated trust company. Because look, they've already published this. We simply follow what they tell us to do. Yet if you look at that guidance, it brings the risks to the foreground, including the very real risks around liability for the trust company if the assets go missing, and even BSA AML risks associated with crypto assets. So now you have the second tension. Fairness is pulling toward we should treat this like other assets, and risk is pulling toward this is not like other assets at all. There are huge risks.
And so this is the full picture. Not a checklist, not a policy discussion, but a field of tension. Anchors in identity, fairness and risk, all acting at the same time. The AFIRE model. And underneath all of it, emotion is already building, even if no one has named it yet.
Yes. Then pressure enters the room because a financial advisor is threatening to take the business to another institution that has already said yes to crypto custody. And the trust company fears the advisor will stop referring future business opportunities to them.
So now the question changes, right? It's no longer just, should we do this? Now it's, what happens if we don't? Or worse, can't.
And this is the moment just before closure, the moment that matters. Because the question has silently shifted. Before, the question was, well, what does the trust license allow? And what does fiduciary duty require? And the question now is, what do we need to defend? Or just putting it another way, for most trust organizations, holy cow, how do we protect ourselves from this? Another comment that SEC Commissioner made in her statement caught my eye. She said in her statement, this moment also presents the SEC with an opportunity to consider whether the custody requirements should be improved and modernized. I love that sentence in her statement because, in essence, this is a moment for the SEC, and not everyone in the room at the SEC agreed with that no action letter. Let me read you something from a statement a fellow SEC commissioner published on the same day, September 30th. She said, "Degrading our custody framework is a serious matter. The statutes and rules regarding custody are what stand between American investors on the one hand and the risk of theft, loss, or misappropriation of their assets on the other." Commissioner was struck that the SEC was eroding their rules to pave the way for a new class of custodians who seem ready to admit that they don't meet the current standards of the custody regime required for crypto asset custody. She goes on to say, as we speak, there are apparently multiple applicants who are, in good faith, seeking national charters from the OCC to offer crypto custody services. With today's no action letter, state trust companies can bypass the entire OCC application process, in which others are participating conscientiously. But rather than create a level playing field, we leave investors and the markets to gamble in an unnecessary game of 50 state regulatory roulette just to accommodate crypto.
Wow. I mean, those are very powerful words. And as we pointed out before, many times on this podcast, disagreement is data.
That's right. So, putting to the side for now the fact that, in my experience, state chartered non depository trust companies already provide custody services for assets, including marketable stocks and bonds. The interesting thing for me here is the diametrically opposed viewpoints from two SEC commissioners and the awareness on the part of one of them of a moment, an opportunity for the SEC. I think this is a live example of an instance of the room, in this case, the SEC, at the moment just before it closes. And what I'm looking forward to is seeing if the SEC can hold that moment and can actually create change for that, overarching question of whether or not state trust companies are permissible custodians. And yes, I know, you both know, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to how the nation's regulatory framework for financial institutions continues to evolve, so I'll stop here. But let me point out that when it comes to a state chartered trust company, or even a nationally chartered trust company for that matter, having to actually make the decision whether to take that leap into providing custody services for crypto assets, either to appease a request from a financial advisor or not wanting to lose a potential revenue opportunity, the judgment is the same. The judgment didn't change. What changed is what the judgment has to protect.
I don't know if this is an open-ended question for either one of you, but what happens next in most institutions?
As we've stated before, the tension is there, and most people and organizations want to resolve that tension quickly. So the system stabilizes. Policies are reviewed, controls are discussed, third-party vendors are considered, and contract language is drafted.
And everything starts to feel structured.
Exactly. Structure increases, confidence appears, but capability has not actually been proven.
Because here's the part that's easy to miss: the invisible threat. Just like a registered investment advisor or broker dealer firm becoming a trustee, which was that invisible threat we discussed in our book, the SEC didn't come right out and say your trust company is capable of custodying crypto assets. They just said, we will not take enforcement action against RIAs and regulated funds who choose to use state chartered trust companies to custody crypto assets.
Well, that right there is a very different statement.
You're exactly right, Carter. Authority was clarified by the regulator, in this case, the SEC, and the joint federal banking agencies, who each issued statements. Capability is assumed by the institution. We custody other assets, we can custody crypto. But the trust company needs to consider all sides. The executive room making the decision needs to allow the tension to hold the moment.
And I love that you talk about the moment, and Joanne, you talk about the moment, and that's what this is about. So despite the pressure of the financial advisor to accept the account and custody the crypto assets, that's tough.
It certainly is. But if the moment is not held,
If the room closes too quickly,
then, as we have said, the AFIRE Compass can't guide the fiduciary judgment.
So now we're back in the room. The client's expectations are real. Competitive pressure is real, right? Because we want to retain these assets. We're probably talking to the client like, oh, I can get this taken care of. A regulatory pathway does exist, and that financial advisor is threatening to take the business elsewhere. So what do you do?
let me just point out this is not a technical question. This goes beyond the current trust company's pre acceptance process. This is an adaptive judgment question for that trust company.
And if the system moves too quickly and never enters the gate, it will answer the wrong question extremely well.
And the risk is not that institutions will answer the question incorrectly. The risk is that they'll feel confident when they make the decision. Because after all, closing the room quickly with a decisive choice can often feel like a victory.
And that's how fiduciary drift begins. Most organizations move past this moment. We don't. What a phenomenal opportunity to talk about this case study. I was super excited about being able to share this with our listeners. And listeners, again, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of The Invisible Threat. Thank you so much for extrapolating and pulling all of that out, sharing those SEC quotes and everything. Joanne, that was so awesome. And talking about the moment is really, really important. And apparently the moment happens a lot, right? And, as we have been talking on here a lot, trying to make that invisible threat visible, that's really the key component on this. So Matt, Joanne, thank you so much for, again, being my co-host on here now and, into the future. It's been really awesome. I'm sure the listeners are getting so much out of this. And Matt, the AFIRE Compass, before we let everybody get going and looking forward, I'm sure that they are to getting more and more about the AFIRE Compass. You want to talk a little bit, as we close out here today on, what that has really meant to you on bringing that as a mechanism to really help in these situations?
Well, as I said, Carter, it came out of the dissertation from my doctorate. And as I said in our very first episode, this was not something that was a hypothesis. It was something that emerged from the research, and it was something that showed up as a phenomenon and has been, something that is extremely strong and something that I certainly feel very, very strong about sharing this with our listeners and with the fiduciary industry. But it's also something that any place that there is judgment, where somebody has responsibility for either someone else's assets in the fiduciary space, or if you have responsibility for somebody else, like if you are, for example, a teacher or a parent or a judge or a police officer, etc. Any place that there is judgment, and there is responsibility somewhere else. The AFIRE Compass is applicable, and what you have to do is not close too quickly, and you have to let the tension hold. Like I said, disagreement is data, and you'll be able to hold that tension for a minute until the compass kicks in, and then you can see judgment and not just walk right into the invisible threat. But that's too often what has occurred. But go back, to the listeners, go back to our episode 1 if you want to reference, the origin of this. And then also my dissertation has been published. You can just search for my name on Google and find the dissertation underneath Dr. Matt Eby.
Joanne, I'm pretty sure you have at least one more thing that you want to share before we let the listeners go.
Well, all I'm going to say is I want to thank you both for letting me nerd out on some of the stuff that I'm very passionate about. And it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I appreciate that you did let me share some of that. It's one of the things that I hope I can, continue to add value here in the podcast. So thank you.
Again, my esteemed co-host, Joanne and Matt Eby, authors of The Invisible Threat. I'm Carter Wilcoxson, CEO and founder of Epic Services Company. Thanking you all for listening, and we will see you next time on The Invisible Threat. Thank you, everybody.